Hi, everyone. We are live. Postgame recap of the Miami Dolphins loss. I'm trying to find the proper way of describing it.
Death March.
Abomination, would that be good?
Yeah, abomination works. Trudge through the mud, nightmare, face plant, bludgeoning, whatever you want to go with.
Okay, those are all good. And we're having our same issue over here. What's going on? Little feedback here. Joined here tonight on this Sunday, September 22nd, 2024, by ESPN radio host and voice of Florida Atlantic football, Ken LaVicka, also a longtime Dolphin reporter and observer, and not a happy camper right now. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, Ken, where to start, man?
You can start from the beginning, that opening Dolphins series where before the injuries, before everything piled up, there's the total panic job on, hey, Jason Sanders, go kick a 57-yard field goal instead of playing for field position, which destroyed the Dolphins from the jump. This whole thing, and I understand the injuries are frustrating, and I know you've addressed it with fans before. There's not a ton you can do about that, but this is what happens when you have a lot of reliance on guys with significant injury histories. When injuries happen, then you're stuck, and I think the overlying storyline from this game is, it has really shown how significant it was that there was no true plan to back up Tua, that he just took it at face value. He made it through a season, so nothing bad could happen. And then you're stuck with Skylar Thompson, and now you have Tim Boyle, and maybe Snoop is ready to go next week at some point. But, man, I look at Indy. You got Joe Flacco. I look at the Raiders. We got Gardner Minshew. I look at the Panthers. Andy Dalton's tearing it up. You had Skylar Thompson and Mike White. I mean, you're getting what you deserve now.
Yeah, and I wrote a column about this, that the next 4 games with Tua and IR were going to be a referendum for the decision the Dolphins made in the offseason. And I was one who was always very quick to say, can we let's Skylar have some playing time before we make a determination on him. And I'm having a very hard time being able to come up with reasons to be optimistic on this, because what we saw today was a guy, again, the processing in the pocket is so insanely slow.
Right.
There's no quick decision making, and it just leads, and he's not good enough in other areas to make up for that.
No, and Poop, here's my thing too. And I really respect Mike McDaniel and his football mind and his IQ and the offense that he put together with the Dolphins. But there's something fundamentally wrong when you have one person who can even come close to competently running it, no matter who it is, right? And then, aside from that, when you apparently or appear to not have any ability to dumb it down to an extent to cater to who is actually playing quarterback for you, that becomes problematic for me as well. Skylar Thompson, you're right. The processing, everything was taking way too long. And we know this is timing based, and we know it's first read, second read, then quickly you've got to filter through. Skylar Thompson's not capable of doing that. I don't care that he's been with the franchise for 3 seasons. Tim Boyle certainly is not going to be able to do that coming off of a practice squad ascension. So you need to put your quarterbacks in a position to succeed. And I think that all came to a head with you're sitting there first and goal. And Tim Boyle made a couple of nice throws, including a pretty sick sidearm sling to Jonnu Smith. Yeah, and then you get down inside the 5, and there's nothing there for him. You don't try to run play action just to get him in space to try and pick out Jonnu Smith again, or the walking yellow flag Julian Hill, or someone, a tight end, somebody. And sure enough, we see what happens. You fail to get points, and that was the game right there. So and also too, I'm sorry to get long-winded, but
too late for that. Sorry,
I know. The Dolphins have played one good quarter of football in 3 games, 12 quarters, 1 good quarter of football. That was in the 3rd quarter against Jacksonville. I mean, Poop, in the first half, they're getting outscored 58-20. 58-20 in the first half. That is unacceptable. That is losing non-playoff team football.
No, right now they're just flat out not a good team. And again, to me, it's like the Dolphins sold themselves on the idea that they were knocking at the door because of what happened the last 3 years, where they put themselves in position and then fell short when they came against up good competition down the stretch, even though because they kept telling themselves it was only because of injuries and never addressed their shortcomings. What they did with the offense was basically like, okay, Robert Hunt, you're too expensive as a guard, which is fine, but not replacing. You just bring back everybody else. You know why? Because we like them and they try hard.
Yeah,
which was literally the essence of the quote when I think it was Mike McDaniel was asked for the reason why they were brought back, and then to come back with those two quarterbacks. And my whole thing was, you've had 3 years of evaluating Skylar Thompson behind the scenes. We don't get that once training camp ends because the media is not allowed past stretching and some very preliminary work and practice. If after 3 years you decided this is a guy who can keep the ship afloat if Tua goes out, and this is the result we see, yikes.
Yeah. I just right now, and again, we don't know. Like I know we're kind of throwing a dart at we're a month out from Tua's return, but we don't know that, right? Like we don't actually know when Tua might come back. Maybe there's a complication and he doesn't come back at all, and then this is what you're stuck with right now. But the offensive line, even before injuries, the offensive line is mediocre at best. Okay, let's just call it what it is. Chris Greer can and it's going to be a quote that lives in infamy, that we're more concerned than he is about the offensive line. But every single game now going back to last season, what, Poop, like 8, 9 NFL weeks of games that matter, it has come to the forefront just how big of a disadvantage that offensive line is, and it continues to pop up. And now kudos to Paul for coming in and playing left tackle with the game still on the line. He hasn't played one snap.
He played one snap. Let's not overstate it.
But he did not get Tim Boyle sacked, and for that I appreciate. But I just, it's popsicle stick construction. Like, that's what it feels like. This is a gust of wind away from completely falling apart. And even when everybody was healthy and you were still feeling good after the Jacksonville win, this team's played 15 minutes of playoff worthy football. You're not the Jets. You're not the Bills. You're not the top 9 teams in the AFC right now through 3 weeks. And I don't think it's close.
No, I agree. And again, there were issues everywhere. And this is what I brought up. When Tua was out in 2022, one thing the defense didn't do that led to the losses, they never came up with any takeaways. Well, they had 2 takeaways today. Right. And one of them gave the Dolphins the ball at the 6-yard line, and they had to settle for a field goal because Julian Hill false started on the first play. And then the second one gave the Dolphins the ball near midfield. So, again, the defense didn't necessarily play great, but it got 2 takeaways. It wasn't terrible. Would have been nice if Javon Holland not bid on that quick inside move by DK Metcalf. Yeah. When his responsibility is the deep part of the field. And then also the special teams. My God, how many? By the way, I believe my count is we're up to 4 or 5 illegal formation penalties, which is when you move before the ball is fielded or lands on the new rules with the kickoff. Yep. I mean, I'm sorry, but special teams coordinator Danny Crossman, get your guys to get their act together on this. Por favor. Right.
I mean, it's week 3 now. Come on. And I know there were a lot of flags today. And were the officials flag happy? Sure. But you still can't take 7 penalties for 50 yards in the first half. You can't have those 4 illegal formation penalties on special teams. You can't have your backup tight end repeatedly not knowing where he's supposed to be lining up or committing a hold or being out of position. I mean, Julian Hill was an absolute disaster. And I saw you tweeting that he has not had a good start. And boy, if that's not an understatement, and I appreciate your ability to be a wordsmith, and you were being
I was saying I was being polite. Yeah,
you're very polite, and that's why I love you, Poop, and it's why I like to be in your company, because you make me feel better about myself. But you're being too nice there. I mean, it's been a complete waste. And the tight end position has been largely a complete waste again. But the defense, you're right. The defense, was it stellar? No. But I want to stress, the defense did enough to win. The defense absolutely did enough to win. It was only the defense that had the Dolphins and Seahawks self-inflicted wounds. They were not much better than the Dolphins after the first quarter. But the defense did its job. And the last thing you want to do, or you'd expect with Mike McDaniel as your head coach, is to have the defense go out for an extended period of time and have to play perfect football to give this football team a chance to win. It shouldn't come to that with this offensive set. I promise you, the 49ers get banged up. The inspiration for Mike McDaniel's offense, they're not having the same problems and the stagnant offense and the trudge through mud that the Dolphins tend to have when things get real poor.
Yeah, no, it's a rough team right now. I do want to point out one play from the officials that somebody, I would hope they're going to review it and somebody's going to get like their hand slapped on it. The one where they called, it wound up being a sack. They called an illegal formation on Austin Jackson.
Yep.
Where if you see the replay, Austin Jackson might have been further up than he's ever been. He wasn't anywhere near close to being too far back. It was Jonnu Smith who was fullback as the tight end, which he's allowed to do. And then Kendall Lamb false started on the left side. They didn't call that.
Right.
And Big kind of stopped, and it wound up being a sack. But
that's what allowed the play to go on, right? Because they would have blown the play dead if they actually called the right penalty, a false start, and that's what allowed the sack and to blow the things up. But then also, too, like you had the play where Alec Ingold just stops because he's hearing an inadvertent whistle in the back. Like I understand the frustration, but again, this was not a well-played game, and it was sloppy, and it was ragged. And, I mean, Poop, and I know it's been an emotional week with Tua, and I know that there's been a lot of discussion about Tua's well-being and what's best for Tua, but you had 10 days, man. You had 10 days to get prepared for this trip to Seattle and play this game. Like 10 days.
The dude was on the sideline with his teammates. He made the trip to Seattle. He was on the sideline. So yeah, that excuse. Yeah, sorry. And I'll go back. And to me, it was just a horrible tone setter. It's 4th and 1 from the Seattle 37 on the first drive, and you're trying a 57-yard field goal. Are you serious? Especially when Jason Sanders, other than always coming through with the games on the line, outside of those situations from 50 and out lately, he's not been good. And again, I'm being very polite.
Yeah, and predictably, it's not even close. I mean, it's absolutely not even close. I'm struggling to figure out how, and I know that there are different groupings out on the field based on different sets, based on different situations. But where's 10 been? Where is 10? All I know is that today I'm seeing Justin Jefferson finding ways to get open for Sam freaking Darnold, who right now is an MVP candidate for the Minnesota Vikings. And Justin Jefferson's just dragging along the back of the end zone. He's finding ways to get open as Sam Darnold creatively finds ways to get out of the pocket. That's premier elite receiver. You are paying Tyreek Hill like an elite premier receiver, and I can't find him. I don't know where he is. And I'm not seeing him create much space. He's being bracketed extremely well. But also, the amount of time he's spending on the sideline right now is very curious to me when you need some sort of safety valve for these clearly deficient quarterbacks that you're playing right now. I listen, I'm in nowhere near the intelligence level. I think we can all agree on that. On Mike McDaniel, okay? But common sense, football brain is telling me something seems a little bit off about this entire thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I completely agree. And again, this is where, to me, I wasn't crazy about what they did in the offseason, and I wasn't shy about saying it. Again, with the Tua contract situation, and also giving extensions to both Mike McDaniel and Jalen Ramsey, who are good at what they do, except they had 2 years left on their contract, and this team hasn't won a playoff game since 2000. What was the hurry? So I just don't know. I'm trying to find like positives from this game. Manuel Ogba really was on early on, played very, very well. Zach Sealer had a sack and a pick. That was nice. What else?
Calais Campbell was disruptive.
He was at a sack, and he had the batted pass that led to the Zach Sealer interception. So yeah, he was good. And then on the flip side, it's not just again the fact they lost. Now we got more injuries after more injuries after more injuries. Skylar Thompson left the game with a chest injury. Who knows what his status is for next week? Now, so now we're looking at Tim Boyle, maybe Tyler Huntley. And then Teron Armstead left the game with an eye injury, did not come back. Don't know exactly the extent of that or the nature of it. David Long Jr., hamstring injury, did not come back. Kendall Fuller had a concussion, did not or was in a concussion protocol, then was ruled out. did not come back. And Storm Duck had an undisclosed injury late in the fourth quarter, did not come back. I mean, man.
I know. It's and another name, Kendall Fuller gave up that sideline catch to DK Metcalf early in this one on the second scoring drive for the Seahawks. But I thought Kendall Fuller, before he went out, played pretty well too. He had a big play that could have been, if he's a split second earlier, just a walk-in pick six along the sideline. But these injuries, but it's the same story, Poop. I mean, it's the same story as 2 years ago, as the same story as last year, as the same story as this year. And I don't mean to come out with the knife sharpened here, but I see a lot of it on social media in relation to you and how you cover this team about, now I bet Alain Poupart is now he's going to boast about how he was right, or reveling in the Dolphins' misery. Stop it. Just because you're not living in a realistic Dolphins situation right now doesn't mean that it's pylon poop time. Things that are pretty obvious. You're relying on guys who tend to be made of porcelain. Okay. You did not plan accordingly for a quarterback who's had one healthy season. Okay. You have very little depth along your defensive front, and you have no depth. And your starting five along the offensive front is questionable at best. What did you think was going to happen? So you're not celebrating anything. These are all the things you were at least trying to give people a heads up about. And hey, guess what? Week 3, it's here.
Yeah, and I was taking the position of can we let Skylar play a game? I mean, he'd made 3 starts as a rookie, and his start. I'm going to go back and I'm going to say it again. His start in the playoff game against Buffalo wasn't nearly as bad as the numbers. So I said, can we just wait? Even though he didn't look good in the preseason or in training camp, sure. It's not the same as the regular season.
Right.
And again, he didn't offer much cause for optimism moving forward with him as a quarterback. We're going to be very blunt. And this is an indictment, because if the Dolphins, if this is indeed the case, if this is what we got with Skylar, then the Dolphins were absolutely negligent in not bringing in either. You mentioned those guys. Jimmy Garoppolo was available right before he signed with the Rams in the offseason. Jameis Winston signed with the Cleveland Browns. Again, they were guys to be had, but the Dolphins, for some reason, decided, let's go with the guys. And if I have to hear, and again, part of it, when Mike McDaniel talked about what gave him confidence about Skylar, it's he knows the system and he's made improvement behind the scene. That's great and dandy and all that, and he works hard. I work hard too. Yeah. Quarterback. I mean, that's. And part of the problem here. Hold on, Ken. Part of the problem here is it's twofold. Is number one, familiarity breeds contempt. Familiarity breeds mediocrity. In this case, number one. Number two, I think what happens sometimes is, especially in the case of people who are smart, they think they can fix and get everybody to a different level, even if it's not realistic.
Yep. Well, let's call it like it is. I was going to say, and I have no problem using this word, let's call it what it is when you think you can go to battle with Skylar Thompson or Tim Boyle or even Mike White. I'll throw him in there. Like, I know we have a lot of Mike White, Broward County supporters. He's not good. Okay. You know what that is? That's arrogance. That's arrogance. It's arrogance that my system, it'll be able to overcome all hurdles in the way. No. And now we're seeing it. And I think it's been a huge reality check. And hopefully it's been a humbling. Here's the thing right now, Poop, is that we could do 4 hours on the long-term ramifications and the broad issues with the Dolphins. Chris Greer, his future. Mike McDaniel, what's going to happen now? What about the future of Tua? But right now, from a micro level, week 3, you're 1-2, and you've played 15 minutes of good football. From a micro level, there are plenty of teams that find a way, despite a cacophony of injuries, to figure it out. And the Dolphins appear to, just like last year and the year before, have not a single solitary plan to figure out the injury problem. And that, to me, that is multi-level mismanagement and, honestly, incompetence, malpractice. And
major props to you, sir, for using cacophony in a football discussion. Very, very well done. Love that.
Thank you.
That. I would tell you this, I think I kind of suggested in my writing. I don't know if I definitively said it. I was not necessarily thrilled with the Skylar Thompson over Mike White decision. Even though technically, yes, he looked slightly better over the summer.
Yeah, no, me neither.
I thought if push came to shove, Mike White would be better equipped to keep the offense afloat. And this obviously did not happen. And now moving forward, the good news is in the next 3 weeks, they have Will Levis, who's a walking turnover. If Julian is a walking flag, he's a walking turnover. Then they have Jacoby Brissett, who is mediocre, or it could be Drake May, who's going to be a newbie in week 5. Then after the bye, they have Anthony Richardson, who also is making bad decisions all over the place.
He threw an interception today that I almost passed out watching. Like, I could not believe what I was putting my eyes on. But if you can't, I mean, you've got to go 2-1 with that, right? Like, based on what's upcoming, 2-1. And I feel like, all right, I can sit here with you after that Colts game. As long as you won the first 2, you lose that one, I'll say, Poop, you know what? Okay. Now you can maybe start to prepare for Tua. But anything less than that, then you better start thinking about playing spoiler down the road. Oh, but Ken, there's a lot of time left. Not with this team. Because, again, even when things were healthy, you had Tua. You were at full strength, or at least full strength you were going to be the first 6 quarters of the season. You didn't look good. You did not look like a contender like the Jets are. I hate to say it. The Jets are and the Bills are in the division.
Correct. And the Dolphins, I believe, based on the tiebreakers, will be in last place now in the division. And by the way, I've had some people ask me this, like in the Miami Dolphins on SI mailbag. Should the Dolphins, if it goes south during Skyler's time at quarterback or during the time that Tua is out, should the Dolphins either become sellers or tank? Number one, no, you don't have to. You have too much of a payroll to tank. And number two, who are you going to trade that's not going to carry a massive cap hit? By the way, when you give a big signing bonus, the signing bonus remains the responsibility of the team that gave the signing bonus. So if you trade somebody who's a big time guy with a big signing bonus, guess what? You're paying for that signing bonus, not the team that acquires him.
Right. And can we put an end to any sort of, and if there's anybody watching this right now or anybody that's going to send messages to us or anybody that's going to send Poop a question for the mailbag, can we stop thinking, go acquire Bryce Young? With the injury problems this team has and the issues it has right now with quarterbacks learning the system, yeah, no, go ahead. A guy who struggled in his system with the Panthers that Andy Dalton in one day mastered today against the Raiders, and a guy, I'm 5'7", a guy who's barely taller than me. Oh, by all means, go give up a 3rd or a 4th round pick for Bryce Young. Yeah, good stuff. Stop it. Don't even go to that place.
But if it were on the table, I'd say the Dolphins absolutely go after Matthew Stafford. But again, why in the hell would the Rams trade Matthew Stafford, especially since, breaking news, the Rams without Puka Nacua, without Cooper Kupp, defeated the 49ers at home today, 27-24. So the Rams...
Injuries, overcoming injuries. Any team that's worth a crap in the NFL can do it, except the Miami Dolphins for some reason.
And for those who go, well, the Rams' injuries are not a quarterback. Well, guess what? The Green Bay Packers were playing with Malik Willis, and they've won their 2 games. I understand they won at Indianapolis and at Tennessee, but there's still 2 road games that they won.
Yeah. Yeah. Matt LaFleur, I think he can coach. I think he's pretty good, and I think he's proven himself. Again, Shanahan lineage there with Matt LaFleur. That dude can flat out coach. But it goes to, I mean, Poop, you and I many weeks ago in the preseason, or even before the preseason started, camp started, we just talked about the overall toughness of the team, a toughness that these Shanahan-based offenses have, like the Packers or the Rams or the 49ers. There's something just different about that version, maybe the more pure version, than this papier-mâché version that the Dolphins trot out there that has a whole lot of speed but not a whole lot of durability. And when things go south, then there is no way to navigate out of that trouble.
I agree. 3 quick notes here before we start part 2, which is the Q&A and the viewer comments. This is going to piss off some people. So be it.
Who cares?
If you don't think Brian Flores can't coach X's and O's, you are nuts. Watch what he's doing in Minnesota. By the way, Andrew Van Ginkel also has a sack in each of the first 3 games. That was a mistake. I don't know if the Dolphins would have had the ability to keep him because he's from the Midwest. Maybe I'm going to try to do some digging into this on whether there was any shot. Number 1. Number 2, the Dolphins now are under 500 for the first time in the Mike McDaniel era. And then number 3, this is the first time they lost back-to-back games by 20 or more points since the first 4 games of the 2019 quote unquote tanking season when they got spanked by the Ravens, the Patriots, the Chargers, and the Cowboys.
Brian Flores can be a not good manager, overseer, CEO of a football team and still know how the hell to coach. He showed how well he could coach with the Dolphins. That's part of the reason that there was controversy, because allegedly the owner didn't like how well the head coach was coaching at a time when he wasn't supposed to be coaching so well. And then jokes were made. I'm sorry. Jokes were made and then issues happened. So I just again, Brian Flores, you can diminish the man or have little respect for the man the way he treated Tua. And I tend to not like the stories I hear about how he treated Tua. I tend to stand by Tua with that. But the guy can coach, and look what he's doing. I mean, the Vikings with Sam Darnold, a punchline for the last 3, 4, 5 years, they're very much in the discussion of a team that can win that division. I mean, that's insane.
No, without question. Okay, so let's do it. Let's attack some of we'll start with our contributors, and we very much appreciate you guys. We appreciate everybody who's joining in for this live post-game recap of a butt-ugly 24-3 loss against the Seattle Seahawks. Matto, thank you very much for the contribution. I know he's a bit slower, but watching Skyler getting killed today just not make me think let's get Tua back in there. Thanks for the post-game stress relief, guys. That's what we're here for.
Is this really like neurotic me going crazy and then Poop having to weather the storm? If that's stress relief for you, though, Matt, like good. You're welcome. I did have the same thought, Poop. Are we in a rush to see Tua get back there and take shots? Like I don't know.
Again, Tua is much better than Skyler at recognizing what's there, what's available than Skyler is. I don't think Skyler necessarily reads the field particularly well, and the processing is not there. So, well, regardless of that, Tua is not going to be brought back until he's perfectly good to go. And the fact that he was out in Seattle with his teammates obviously clearly is a good sign that he's recovering well. But he's on IR for a reason.
Right. And I do know that as soon as the Dolphins give the go-ahead, and this is where you're just going to have selective hearing, when the Dolphins do give the go-ahead for Tua to play, there is going to be a lot of detractors that, how can you put him back in action? How can he play it all again this year? Did you see the fencing position? And all that stuff. I promise you, it is going to be extremely frustrating for you, the Dolphins fan, or the Tua supporter, when the Dolphins go ahead and make the move to put Tua back in, and you're just going to have to weather that storm. That is my set the table warning for all of you when this eventually does happen.
Your fearless prediction. Here's the thing, though. Again, if Tua, don't think that Tua is going to make the decision to come back without consulting with neurologists and doctors all over the place. If once he gets that information, and I'm sure Anna Tagovailoa is going to have a say in all this, Mrs. Tua. If at that point, if all parties agree, and then Tua decides to come back, don't you think it's his call to make? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. All I know is that, Poop, I work for ESPN, okay?
Oh, I know, trust me.
I know what's going to be put out there. I just want all the people watching right now when you get mad at the ESPN talking heads, just leave me out of it. Know that I'm aligned with you, okay? There we go.
You're aligned with me or the people who say he shouldn't come back?
No, I'm aligned with you. You and the Dolphins people. A man of the Dolphins people. That's me, Poop.
Okay. No, again, it's his call. I mean, we can all be. It's obviously it's not going to be a great situation if you see somebody barreling down on him. Again, he's a grown man. He's going to have all the information. He can make his own informed decision.
Right.
So, Randy Rogers. Hey, Randy, thank you very much for the contribution. Any chance Ross realizes it takes more than intelligence to be a good coach? How do I answer this? Stephen Ross is a guy who listens to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
He's also got a team that for the past 2 years was relevant, and he was relishing in that. And Mike McDaniel helped the Dolphins become relevant, certainly got the best out of Tua. So I don't know that Stephen Ross is going to microanalyze Mike McDaniel and decide, does he measure up in all levels of the coaching qualifications besides being intelligent? I don't know that Stephen Ross would go there.
Yeah, I have a hard time sending this all the way up the ladder to Stephen Ross. Like I'm an unapologetic Stephen Ross supporter, and you and I were both there. I mean, Poop, we were sitting there at the table in that awkward media availability that they had in Davie when Stephen Ross had to sit there with Tony Sperano and had to sit there with Jeff Ireland, and they had to explain themselves about pursuing Jim Harbaugh after the Orange Bowl in Stanford and how all that went down. I think he learned his lesson there, and you're right. He takes a lot of input from a lot of people, but I don't think he's meddling owner, and I think he always has the best interests of the franchise in mind. I think he wants to win, and he's willing to put a lot of money towards winning. If there was no salary cap in the NFL, I mean, this dude would be spending Dodgers-esque money every single year. Okay. He just would be. So I don't, other than intelligence, like I think that's part of it though. And I think of what Mike McDaniel does is he brings a new age offensive scheme, and a scheme that if you're good in the NFL, chances are you have part of the blueprint, at least a portion of that Shanahan offense. And so Mike McDaniel is an attractive candidate. And I don't think he's a bad coach, but boy, this game planning and this preparation, that's been a significant problem for the last, 6, 7, 8 games that have mattered.
And I also don't know who to blame for this, but there were a few instances where the play clock was running down and they had to burn a couple of timeouts. So no, he's not perfect, but he accomplished some good things in his first 2 seasons with the Dolphins. We should not forget that. Before we move on to the next comment / question, for those who may not have picked up all the late afternoon scores, I like to. I'm going to play broadcaster update. Here's a Sports Center update. Oh, sorry. No, Dolphins podcast update. Well, there are the late afternoon scores. Carolina goes to Vegas, gets their first win of the season, 36-22. I mean, talk about a wah for the Raiders after their big win at Baltimore.
Yep.
Detroit Lions bounced back from their loss at Tampa Bay, win at Arizona 20-13. Ravens 28 over the Cowboys 25, and then the Rams, as we mentioned, with the upset over the 49ers 27-24. Back to the question comment. Chris Draves, thank you very much for the contribution. How can you pre-read the defense with 5 seconds coming out the huddle? I watched Aaron Rodgers have 15 seconds to look around pre-play. Just ridiculous. Chris, you are not wrong.
No. I think the crowd noise played a little bit into it, but I also think that there's a lot there to consume and then to communicate. And Skylar Thompson clearly, I don't care that he spent 3 years in the system, and that's why Mike McDaniel trusts him. That did not go well. And Tim Boyle, the same thing happened to him. There was a sequence in the first half as well when things were really free-falling where, I don't know if you recall this, but Mike McDaniel is standing by the line judge, okay? And there's 3 or 4 on the play clock, and he's trying to get a timeout, and there's such poor communication. The line judge, he ends up waving him off because Skylar Thompson's not even paying attention, and he's already gone into asking for the ball to be snapped. And so you can't get the timeout then, and everything got blown up, and he ended up fumbling and falling on his own fumble on that play. That's sort of what we're talking about here is the Dolphins, based on communication from the sideline, they were put in a lot of positions to fail today. And I hate to say it, but Coach McD, that falls on him.
Yeah, that was a play where he dropped the snap, picked it up. Teron Armstead got beat by Draymond Jones, and it resulted in a sack. I'm going to look at the comments from the end of the game on, the end game comments where everybody
unloaded.
Yeah, that's wow. This is an interesting one. Nestor, Poop, you mentioned malpractice. The Dolphins stunk it up. You were to be looking for a good law. Yeah. Again, it was one game. If it continues at the next 4, then we're talking this was roster management malpractice.
I do like you get a personal injury sponsor on this, Poop, and that way you can just throw malpractice around all you want, and it's an easy sponsorship tie-in.
Okay, lawyers out there, if you heard that, there you go. Let's see. Here we go. Jason Lape. I'm assuming it's Lape. Whole team played like garbage. Too many penalties. We have too much that has to go perfect for plays to work, and the O-line is worse than last year. If that is possible, we need all the backup QBs.
Yeah,
no, I told.
Yeah. I don't. This is what I'm trying to rationalize right now, Poop. Like, it has been really ugly for 3 weeks. And you're lucky. You're fortunate to have a win out of all of that, all things considered. And now you're without Tua for who knows at this point, though I think you and I are both anticipating, if the doctor says okay, if the family and especially his mom says okay, we're anticipating Tua is going to be back. I'm not ready to proclaim the season is over, but when you talk about that, you need to add some context. This was a Dolphins team that came into this season confident that it wasn't just going to be, made it in as a 7 seed. This was supposed to be compete for the division, win the division, host a playoff game, make a run, win a game, that entire thing. So for me, I'm not ready to declare the season over, but based on the Dolphins' definition of what this season should be, I think there's a little bit of different approach to that. And based on their definition, I'm maybe 3 or 4 weeks away from starting to think maybe this season is over, because I don't see how it's currently constituted wins a playoff game.
Yeah, but what then? I mean, what's that going to mean? I mean, again, you're not going to trade. I mean, you're not going to have a fire sale.
No. You wrap everybody in bubble wrap and say, stay in your home all off season, and then you hope that everybody stays healthy next year.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure that would work well with the paying customers. This one made me laugh here. Sorry, hold on. Let me see what I'm. Sal, really, Sal? Come on. Hi, Sal. But reporters need to tell McDaniel that we, the fans, are mad and upset. I'm sure that's really consuming his thoughts. Even though he actually is going to mention it, that he wants to make the fans happy and all that. I think he's more concerned about his players, the organization, and all that.
Poop, can we role play real quick? You want to be Mike McDaniel, and I'll be an intrepid Dolphins reporter. We'll role play here. Just if you could just pretend you're standing.
The problem is Ken, I don't have the vocabulary of Mike McDaniel, and I can't filibuster for 3 minutes.
That's a good point.
Because that's what it would be.
Could you imagine if you were Mike McDaniel and to lead off the press conference, after you got manhandled physically in Seattle, and your first half was a complete dumpster fire, and my first question to you is, Coach, Ken LaVicka, ESPN, are you aware how mad the fans are at you? How do you how do you, McDaniel, because he's polite, would probably say, I get it. I get it. And I understand how this goes. And it's the business. But also, no. Poop's not going to do that. And nobody should do that.
Correct. Certainly not after a game, at a different time. And I think he's actually been asked this question in one way, shape, or form, was, can you feel a level of frustration from the fans? I think he was asked in that form, and that's fair game. But can you say, how upset are you that you're letting down the fans? Sorry, no, not happening. Okay, Matto. Hey, Matto, again, I'll ask the bleakest week 3 question. At what point do we need to worry about McDaniel, et cetera, losing the locker room? I don't know that Mike McDaniel ever will lose the locker room, because he's a player's coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you see guys starting to loaf around, then maybe we can start being concerned about that. I have a hard time seeing that happening.
Mike McDaniel we've already covered the downside of being ultra loyal to players that aren't good enough for you to be loyal to, right? i.e. Skylar Thompson. But when it comes to the NFL, especially when you're managing egos, you know what goes a long way for players? The loyalty that a coach shows them. That's the best way to navigate out of a whole lot of muck and crap. And when things are going poorly is when these high-priced, high-personality, high-ego players know that the coach has their back. I doubt, if anything were to happen to Mike McDaniel, and again, that's not going to happen, but if anything were to happen to him, it's because he doesn't win enough games, not because he lost a locker room. I would be stunned if that ever was the situation with Mike McDaniel.
Correct. And somebody had asked me before the season if I thought he was in trouble. And this was before he got the extension of 2 more years with 2 years left on his contract. And I said the only way his seat would even get above freezing would be if they go 5-12 with injuries not being a factor. Well, guess what? Injuries are a factor. And even if the season really goes south, I don't see him as being in danger in the least.
Right.
Yankee lover. You like the Yankees? 1994, baby. You were going down. Sorry. Thank you.
Well, the White Sox were going to beat the Expos in 94 anyways, Poop. But that's another podcast.
So okay, and then and that other podcast, maybe we'll talk about the 2024 White Sox.
Damn you, Poop! You got me so good.
Thank you. They of the what 118? I lost.
No. They're 119, and I haven't looked at the score, but they could tie the record today at 120.
That's the most losses ever. I mean,
in modern day baseball. Yep.
That is historically ridiculous. Okay. Anyway, thank you for the contribution, Yankee lover. I kid. You're allowed to root for whoever you want. Boyd looked better than Skyler. You are not wrong. I actually completely agree with you. Even though this is where good old passer rating, Skyler had a higher passer rating than Boyd. Even though I agree the Boyd looked
better. Yeah. And part of that too, because passer rating is skewed, it's just how many snaps Skylar Thompson played. Like that's factored into this cockamamie math that goes into that. But the pass that cleared the linebacker, the sidearm pass to Jonnu Smith to get deep into Seahawks territory, that ruled. That was awesome. He actually showed a command of the pocket. I was going to, if they scored a touchdown, I was ready to tell the world I was a Boyle believer. Unfortunately, really poor adjustment play calling ruined the entire thing. But let's not mistake this. If Snoop's ready to go next week, if he's ready to go next week, you can't start Tim Boyle. That's a bad idea.
I actually have a better nickname than that. A Boy-lever.
A Boy-lever. There you go. See? Man, Poop, you are workshopping things so good today. Man.
Nick talks Batman. By the way, that reminds me, completely off topic. Just want to throw it out there. If any of you were interested but hesitating about going to see Beetlejuice, go see it. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, I didn't see that coming. Okay.
We digress. Nick talks Batman. Thank you very much for the contribution. Lots of off-the-field issues with his team. No depth, too many players, key players lost on O and D-line. Until we prioritize the lines, it'll be the same story. You are not wrong, my man.
No, but Nick, I got bad news for you. The season started. So there's not going to be very much reinforcement of these lines unless you have some magic healing elixir for Teron Armstead. Because other than that, this is what you've got. This right here is what you've got. And you know it's going to get injured, and you know that it's going to be piecemeal, and you know that there are going to be holes in it. So you've just got to hope that Achane, we didn't mention Achane, by the way, him as a feature back, and I don't know how sustainable it is, but Devon Achane is real. He is super real. And again, you don't want him to be your feature back. You need Mostert back at some point here. But Achane, despite what's in front of him, and despite the fact that without Tua, everybody knows what's coming, good job by Achane. He has been, I know people are mad at Chris Greer. He has been a Chris Greer success story.
True. I don't disagree with that. But let's go back to the offensive line.
Oh, yeah, you're screwed.
No. What I was going to say is there were two crossroads within the last 5 years, I want to say, where the Dolphins made a decision. And I don't know that they were necessarily bad decisions at the time, but they went away from a core anchor offensive lineman to get something else. For example, number one, the Laramie Tunsil trade.
Mm-hmm.
That was not part of the rebuilding project. It's just that Chris Greer said the Texans kept coming back and made him an offer they couldn't refuse eventually. And again, you cannot argue what the Dolphins got, except 5 years later, Laramie Tunsil is one of the best left tackles in the NFL, and the Dolphins have a very good yet injury-prone veteran who I'm going to venture to guess probably is playing his last season. In 2021, with the 6th overall pick after the Dolphins traded from 3 to 12 to 6, the Dolphins could have taken Penei Sewell, who was acknowledged as clearly one of those can't-miss prospects. Dolphins chose Jalen Waddle. Again, impossible to complain about that decision when the dude has 3 1,000-yard seasons in 3 years, except the Detroit Lions right now have maybe the best offensive line in the NFL, and it's anchored by Penei Sewell.
Right.
So how do the Dolphins look different if in either of those cases they make the decision to hang on to the stud offensive lineman?
I saw someone who messaged me, Poop. You don't want Achane to be the featured running back. That's dumb. No. It's not that I don't want Devon Achane to be the feature running back. It's that I don't think he's built to be a feature back. We've just sat here talking about how injuries at every position are torpedoing the Dolphins season, and you want diminutive Devon Achane to be your feature back when he should be a complimentary back. And then, I mean, hell, Poop, in the game against the Jaguars, he's the fourth wide receiver for the Dolphins. So he's obviously really versatile. You don't want him taking on the contact that a feature back would take. So no, it's not me not wanting to be the feature back. Hell, if someone of his ability could touch the ball every play, that's great. But I prefer him not to be on IR or soon to be on IR like everybody else on this freaking roster.
Damn, passion emanating from Ken. And by the way, since you mentioned him being used as a wide receiver, first play of the game, he's lining up in the slot and catching the 22-yard pass from Skylar Thompson. So, but I'm with you. And again, he needs the blocking. Today he had 11 carries for 30 yards.
Yeah.
You can't do it without blocking those running backs unless you're Barry Sanders. Steven Jean-Baptiste, thank you very much for the contribution. Hey, guys, are you as sick and tired as I am?
The Dolphins or just in general?
Speaking only for myself, it's my job, dude.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I would have appreciated a better performance than this crap that we saw. I don't know if I'm sick and tired of it, but I'm kind of semi over the rinse. Was it wash, rinse, repeat?
That's the thing. If this was like fun drama where like it was something new that we've never seen before every week, and you're like, boy, this is a circus. Like, okay, I'll take that. But this is the thing that's so frustrating with the Dolphins when they're at 3 weeks into the season. I didn't think that it would happen this early, but you knew that eventually we were going to get into the same things we've been seeing the last 2 years. A potential to an injury, and it turned into a realization. Offensive line decimated, defensive line struggling with its depth, all things that were wildly predictable. And here they are. That's what's frustrating and annoying is that we all saw this. If you have any semblance of a functioning brain, yet we were gaslit by some within the organization. It's fine. This is the path. These are the expectations. No, this was so easy to see what was going to take place.
Devin Barry, thank you very much, Devin. Am I crazy to think that no QB aside from the quick release of Tua could win games with this OL? No QB is a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a big factor in helping survive. And I think I mentioned that earlier is the scheme is kind of designed again a lot around what Tua does best, and that's get rid of the ball. And generally that lessens the pressure on offensive linemen. The problems come if Tua's not there, A, or B, if Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle can't get open very quickly, then Tua has to hang on to the ball, and then the deficiencies of the offensive line get exposed.
You're right. And so I guess we mentioned those names like the Gardner Minshews of the world, the Jameis Winstons of the world, the Joe Flaccos of the world that were out there and able to be acquired in the offseason. It is a decent point. Would those guys be able to succeed behind this offensive line? Now, I don't know if you change the way that the blocking schemes work because those guys come in. I do know there's something to be said for a ton of experience and the ability to make decisions and figure out where check down should go to, or first or second or third read should go to. I just know that if I have the experience of a Joe Flacco, or even the starting experience of a Gardner Minshew, for who all intents and purposes played in a postseason game in week 18 of the season over Skylar Thompson, I'm going with those other two names.
No, without question. Nick talks about Batman again. Thank you again. The Dolphin offense hasn't been the same since Connor Williams got injured last year and played his last game. Unsung hero of last year's offense.
It was unexpectedly consistent. That's for sure.
You're not wrong because he got hurt against Tennessee. Then the following game was against the Jets, where the Dolphins took advantage of a horrible offense. The Dolphins had some success offensively, even though they didn't put up big numbers yardage-wise. And then after that, you're looking at the last 3 games. And since then, they haven't produced. It's 22 points, 19, 14, 7 in the playoff game, 20 in the opener this year, 10-3. So
I wonder, though, if the Connor Williams ascension last year, because you remember he spent the first month of the season snapping ground balls to Tua, right? Like it was a little bit of a transition for him. It wasn't the most smooth.
That was 2 years ago.
Was it 2 years ago? I thought it was last year.
No, he got that straightened out.
You're right. You're right. So never mind. Well, no, but I guess this does speak to my point, though. Like, you do have someone who's able to work himself into that, right? Because he was not a natural center. And then he was able to work himself into that and be very consistent. And yes, it took him the span of a season and a half, but it's possible. But right now, time is not of the essence for the Dolphins. They don't have the time now to say, hey, man, I really hope that this can really expedite over the next 3, 4, 5 weeks. Like, the production needs to happen now, and the production is not happening. I don't think it's even close to being able to hit some sort of acceptable rate.
Fair enough. Kevin here is no. You guys, if you're going to be talking with among each other, that's fine, but we're not going to bring those up. That's fine. Stu, to me, the lack of developing or bringing in a reliable QB backup is a fireable offense. Greer should not be back. Well, I think Greer has a lot of equity with Stephen Ross. So this notion that he's going anywhere, I'm not sure.
You can be frustrated with Chris Greer and the way that this roster is built up and how all of this has bubbled to the surface. But Chris Greer, unless something stunning happens, I mean, he's going to remain the general manager. There's not going to be a drastic change. He's going to be here for the draft. He's going to be here in free agency. So you can wish it into existence all you want. It's not going to happen. It's just not.
No, I agree. Kevin with an interesting point. Watching this game, I had no emotions. LOL. Feels like I'm watching the Jets from last year. Oof, that's like. And by the way, speaking of roster management malpractice, that's what the Jets said last year when it was all about Aaron Rodgers and they left themselves with like Tim Boyle. No offense, and it could be nice to him now because he's on the Dolphins roster.
Right.
But also Zach Wilson, who was a lost cause in New York. Apparently, he's straightened out a little bit in Denver. But once Aaron Rodgers got injured, they were done. And part of their issue also, they had no offensive line. So while their defense was good, it was completely so overtaxed that it couldn't hold up.
The one thing that's going to be different, and I don't know how the rest of the season is going to work out for the Dolphins. The one thing that's going to be different, though, is one, that you're not going to have Tua on Pat McAfee every week saying whatever in God's name comes to the top of his head based off of something he's seen in the deep recesses of Reddit, right?
Egypt.
Right. You're not going to have the drama and the tension and the issues that existed in that Jets locker room last year. So that's the one solace, is that as we laid out, Mike McDaniel's not going to lose a locker room. I don't think Tyreek Hill is going to go on some public campaign against his head coach or act out or do anything like that. But from a pure approach to the season roster-wise, this has some frightening, no lessons learned similarities, parallels to the Jets from last year. I think that's a very accurate and pretty intelligent observation.
And I would make the argument that the Jets defense last year is probably better than what the Jets defense is this year.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Cincinnati Fins fan, this team hasn't been good with Tua either. When was the last good offensive game, start to finish? Not a good quarter or half, but a good offensive game. Probably Washington last year.
Yeah.
Would be the last one.
Yeah. That's the last time. Yeah, we probably saw Tua at his absolute best for a 4-quarter game. Deep ball to Tyreek and slinging the ball all over the place. Yeah, you're right. I was going to go back and legitimately look at the schedule from last year, but you nailed it. It absolutely was the Washington game, and that's the last time you felt really good about how things were going, because then it started briefly, but then dropped completely. The slide started to happen after that.
Correct. See what we got here. We're going almost on an hour. We're going to go about another maybe 5-10 minutes before we wrap it up. Okay, I don't want to bring you up, Nestor. I'm not going to bring you up on the screen because you used a bad word, and I don't like that. But how come this kind of stuff never happens to the 49ers? 49ers are 1-2, by the way. So
yeah,
I don't know if it's this thing. I mean, they didn't lose 24-3, but they lost at the Rams minus Cooper Kupp minus Puka Nacua.
Probably 2 or 3 weeks away from questions about the Ayuk deal with the Niners as well. I feel like we're getting there.
Matto, back-to-back teams, or at least fan bases wondering, why didn't we keep Mike White in 2023 and 2024? I wonder how he feels about it. That's interesting.
But like Mike White's turning into this this myth that he's good. Okay, he's not. And I apologize to the South Florida football fans that love Mike White or watched him in high school. And
Dare you?
I just can't. You're bringing Mike White into your football bosom and cradling him there and saying, "Oh, I love you. You're so good," but he's not good. He's not good. Okay, he's just like Tim Boyle, who's played for 6 teams. Mike White's just bouncing around. Like, stop.
Ken, come on, man.
Mike White's not good.
I love you, buddy, but Ken, come on. First of all, Mike White has made 7 career starts, and 3 of those career starts with the Jets has a passer rating of over 100.
Okay. So now you believe in passer rating. Now you're good with it.
It doesn't always tell the whole story, but in those games, it's not just a passer rating. He actually played very well.
No, I get it. And they wore the shirts and they were supportive of Mike White. I know. I remember.
Okay. And I don't think Mike White's a great quarterback. I do think Mike White's better than Skylar Thompson. So
what if the Dolphins, they go and acquire him from the Bills practice squad this week and they admit that we got it wrong? Go get Mike White if he means that.
You actually think that's going to happen?
Well, no, and I know it's not going to happen, but so many of the football fans and Dolphins observers say like, "Oh, Mike White. What if it was Mike White?" You can still go get him. You can admit to the mistake and go bring him in and see what happens if Mike White is running this offense. I promise you, he's not. He's maybe 2 games better over the course of 10 than Skylar Thompson is.
That's a big difference. But again, it's not going to happen, so it's pointless to talk about it. But like I said, I just wanted to on the record. I didn't like the move.
Oh no, I'm with you. I just think they're more interchangeable than I think people are trying to make it. Like Mike White was this appreciably, unbelievably better option than Skylar Thompson. I just think they're both bad.
Okay, man, you're harsh. Man, you're harsh. See, I'm very polite. You're not. Okay, Michael Bauer. Hey, Michael. Who else is waiting for Miami to cut Armstead? Are you serious, Michael? Let's go ahead and cut your best offensive lineman because he gets injured more often than. By the way, and because nobody's going to say it, does anybody not feel bad for the dude that he works as hard as anybody else, but just cannot?
I know.
Break.
When you get it, trust me, as a man who hit 40 back in July, sometimes the injuries, it's just a cascade and it piles up on you. And I don't even do a modicum of what Teron Armstead has to do for his career. I talk for a living and I'm still taking on injuries. It's really difficult when your body just starts to break down. But in all jokes aside, you've invested a lot and not only financially, but also with the success of the franchise on to Teron Armstead and the fact he can't stay healthy. It's just sort of a harbinger of the way things are going.
Yeah, and the folks watching this don't know this, but Ken was actually listed as questionable for the podcast today.
Yeah, larynx. Yeah,
exactly. A limited practice on Friday. What the hell? Wow, Mr. Torres 78. Feel free not to watch. I mean, what a jerk comment. I'll put it up so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm assuming you're talking about me, or even if you're talking about Ken. I mean, what a jerk comment. You got to stop listening to this fool. He gets a kick with us losing. I just don't get it.
I mean, Poop, we already addressed this, and I already called out the fans who think that you're having fun with this. Poop covers the team objectively. That is what he does, and he laid out why he thought the way that this roster was constructed could be an issue with losses and then not any real substantive additions throughout the course of the offseason leading into camp. He said, hey, look out for this. And now you're mad because Poop was right about this. That's not a Poop problem. That's a you problem. You chose to mock Poop and say, oh, he's a hater. No, turns out he was right because he was using common sense. Enough. Go be mad somewhere else.
And dude, Mr. Torres, I don't get a kick out of it, but this is my job. As I've said many, many times on the podcast, I am not a fan per se. There are a ton of fan podcasts. This is not one of those. I'm a journalist who's covered this team continually longer than anybody in the market. I know this Dolphin team and the history of the franchise like the back of my hand. When they lose, it's not like I'm going to go kick my cats after we're done with the podcast because I'm so upset. Sorry if that bothers you.
Right. And I mean, Pope, you and I have been in plenty of Dolphins locker rooms and through plenty of times where it's bad. You know what's not fun is covering a team where you walk into the locker room and it's dark and it's tense and you know that those guys have a whole lot on their minds other than having to fulfill media responsibilities because their season is tanking. That's not fun. Nobody who covers this team is wishing for that. Stop.
Correct. It's not, if this season goes south and the Dolphins become irrelevant in the second half of the season, this job sucks. Well,
yeah.
I shouldn't go that far, but it's not nearly as enjoyable. Okay.
Right.
So please stop with suggesting I get a kick out of the Dolphins. Losing, not playing well. Excuse me. Omar, how are you, Omar Davila? Why is it we can't run a third and short? We have a fullback. Here's the thing. Did you know, fun fact, the Dolphins actually converted their first 4 third-and-1 runs this season. First 4. But since then, it's gone south. They can't do it anymore. And on the one today, Alec Ingold, I don't know if he never got the handoff cleanly or he got hit, but that ball came loose and he wasn't going to get it anyway because there was no movement up front. And this is where then on 4th down, they tried to go for it and it didn't work. But that's still an issue.
I mean, after the win over the Jaguars, you and I sat here, Poop, and we gave a rousing verbal ovation to Alec Ingold converting multiple short yardage situations. A fullback, fantastic. But here's the problem. Now, teams know it's coming. And I think that when you have in a short yardage situation, Ingold back there, especially in one of those offset or I sets, you kind of know what's going to happen now. It's on film. They've seen it. And the offensive line, when defenses are keyed in on it, the offensive line is now not good enough to block it. And you notice, too, Alec Ingold, it's not like he's getting stopped 4 inches short. He's getting pushed backwards. It's not even close. And so there are a multitude of problems. That's why they can't convert a 3rd down, though. It all starts up front. Or a 4th down in short. It starts up front.
And they also don't have the added element that certain teams have with a big or very shifty quarterback to gain that 1 yard from time to time, to at the very least present that as a challenge.
Yep.
Okay. For example, the Eagles with the tush push and Jalen Hurts because he squats 680 pounds or whatever. Josh Allen because he's built like a linebacker. Lamar Jackson because he's freaky fast. Kyler Murray can do that because he's freaky fast. The Dolphins don't have that, and so now they have to do it the more conventional way, which is either play action and throw it or run, which is usually up the middle.
And this is, I feel bad saying this, but once Tua comes back, that was part of the reason he cut all that weight, was to be able to do something like that. And they are unequivocally, absolutely not going to have him in that situation, period, point blank. Not a chance.
Not even last year with the extra weight. That's not something you would do with him. He just doesn't have that build. Don Shula, 73. Thank you, Don. Oh, by the way, we should mention this again, much bigger than the Dolphins and the Dolphins lost today. We should note the passing of Mercury Morris at the age of 77. A great member of the Super Bowl teams of the 1970s. He's among the top rushers and kickoff returners in franchise history. Good dude off the field as well. Electric. To me, he was like, if you want to know what Mercury Morris was like as a player in the 1972, 1973, I think maybe a little bit Devon Achane-ish.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up, too, like, good dude. Any interaction that I had with Mercury Morris, and I think a lot of people had their own views or felt their certain ways about Mercury Morris, but I think anybody in South Florida generally who ran into him over the last 10, 15, 20 years, that dude was super fun. Like, just an absolute pleasure to be around. And it's definitely a huge loss, a massive loss to the Dolphins community. But I kept going back today, the times I was able to shake his hand, run into him, and it was always fun and light and funny. And it's extremely sad that he's gone.
Yeah. And if you want to know a little bit more about him, I guess you can check out the NFL. I think it was NFL Network's NFL Films documentary on the perfect backfield. Mercury Morris, Larry Zonka, and Jim Kick, which again, Mercury and Larry Zonka were the first teammates to each rush for 1,000 yards in the same season. That happened in 1972 when Mercury Morris actually had 1,000 on the nose. Okay, let's get back to the comments. I hate to segue into this, but there's no other way around it. There's nothing going to be smooth about this. Don Shula, and you know what? You know what brought it to mind is Don Shula 73. That reminded me that we need to mention Mercury Morris. Clock management appears to be an issue. That's on McDaniel. And this is the part again. I don't recall those happening when Tua was a quarterback earlier this year, but today we were back again. And if you remember Skyler's last start in the playoff game at Buffalo, again there were clock management issues.
And again, I don't know enough to say, hey, Mike McDaniel, why don't you just cater it better to the quarterback who's in the game? I'll be honest, like I don't know the inner workings of that, but I do know, just because I live in the college football realm, and I've done so for a long time, anytime that there is a new quarterback in a system that is elevated on short notice, these offensive coordinators, these head coaches, and I'm sure it's a little bit different on the pro level than the college level, but boy, they are slashing half of that playbook. And they are changing cadences, and they are changing formations to cater to the strength of said quarterback. And the way things operated today, how sloppy it was, and how long it took communication from the sideline to get out there, I don't know if that took place.
Bobby, thank you, Bobby. What happened to any quarterback could succeed in this offense? Well, first of all, let's get the record straight. Nobody ever said that anyone can succeed in this offense. However, I will point out that under the Shanahan tree offense, Shanahan, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, Mike McDaniel, the following quarterbacks have had seasons producing, and again, Ken, don't shoot it back at me, passer ratings of 100 or more, including Jared Goff. I'm sorry, he's not a great quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo's done it several times. Brock Purdy all over the place, and there's some debate as to just how good Brock Purdy is. So if you don't think it's a system that is conducive to producing good numbers for quarterbacks, or maybe easier to produce good numbers for quarterbacks than other systems, I don't know what to tell you. Obviously, very clearly, you still have to have a certain level of efficiency as a quarterback, and this is why I have always said Tua is a good quarterback. Sometimes he's very good. I don't think he's elite per se, but he is perfect for this offense. They have tailored everything around him, and this is why he's able to make it function as well as he does, except that we have not seen it against the quality opponents at crunch time.
Yeah.
Hope that answers your question.
Since we're talking about the system, and I asked earlier, where's 10? Where's Tyreek Hill? I think that within the system, you can get away with not having a sizable wide receiver because everything is timing based and everything is designed to be in space. This is where, though, if it's not Tua and you don't have someone who's able to keep up with the speed and the motion and the timing of this offense, you could conceivably lose. I know it sounds ghastly, but lose Tyreek Hill in the mix or lose Jalen Waddle in the mix, because are they going up and winning jump balls? Are they going to be massive targets a la Justin Jefferson down the sideline? No, they're not. So if they're running these crossing routes and you can't find them in enough time, then I guess my question of where's 10 can be answered simply by he's part of this system. And if this system isn't run by the guy who makes it function best, then that's how an all-world talent like that can just go by the wayside.
Yeah, and that team, I think at times also you have to force feed it to him. I mean, they threw, I don't know how many times it was targeted. One of those was like on a 3rd and 15, and they throw a wide receiver screen, and they dropped the ball. Even if he didn't catch it, I mean, if he did catch it, you're not getting the first down anyway. Yeah. I would have liked to see why we're not seeing any no end arounds with him, no jet sweep with him. Get the ball in his hands. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. I got 2 more here. Let's go. Matt Fleming, 7776. Thank you. Oh, London.
Nice.
Loved your city. Saw it for the first time this summer. Very much enjoyed it. Is McDaniel's hyper speed onset headed the way as the Wildcat one-hit wonder? Good concept, but too flimsy to base a whole offense on? That's a good question.
Well, the system is run by almost all of the elite offenses in football. Okay. Like the system, no, but maybe the speed, like it's based more on speed than the Niners. It's based more on speed than the Packers. It's based more on speed than you go down the line. Right. But I guess the speed. I don't know. I have a hard time believing that, Poop. Like I have a hard time believing that it's a la Wildcat. It just, you need it to be tougher though. You can have speed and you can have durability. That also term durability.
Correct. No, and I agree. And that's a problem with. And in fact, I'm going to go back, and if you guys haven't checked it out, Miami Dolphins on SI.com. When the Dolphins, before they played Buffalo in that Thursday night game, Amazon had a conference call with their 4 former players who were analysts: Tony Gonzalez, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Richard Sherman, Andrew Whitworth. And I asked them their confidence level for the Dolphins taking the next step, or whether they were concerned that the Dolphins style, which emphasizes speed over physicality, had a ceiling. And Andrew Whitworth, not surprising, the offensive lineman would say you have to be, they have to be more physical. And the fact that all of them are saying Dolphins absolutely positively have to have a home game, that's an indictment right there on their style of play.
Well, what you're banking on is having a path a la the 99 Rams, right? Where you have all that speed, and they weren't the toughest team, but things were able to they played most of their regular season indoors or on an artificial surface. In the postseason, they got home field advantage, and then the Super Bowl was indoors as well. So everything went their way, but that's like once in a generation luck where everything transpired the way it was. You can't necessarily plan for that. So the system, I don't think it's one and done a la Wildcat, but I think it's certainly flawed to a point where you need to reevaluate it.
Okay, that's fair enough. And it should be noted also that for all of their speed in their offense, I mentioned this before, the Rams won the NFC Championship game that year 11-6, and they won the Super Bowl 23-16. Yeah. So at that point, the defense also had to chip it. Yeah. So last one here, Omar Davila, you get the honor of being the last comment question. And I want to thank you very much for the contribution. Did you notice when this offense was humming last year? Oh, I remember they had Connor Williams, Wynn, Hunt, Teron, Jackson. When it was humming. Okay.
Yeah.
Did they have all those 5 together? Well, because I'm trying to think, how often did they have those 5 together? I know they had those 5 together for the Denver game before Connor Williams went out.
That was coming.
Yeah. But after that, Connor Williams missed a few games, and then Isaiah Wynn went out week 7 against the Eagles. So I don't even know how many games they had those 5 guys together. So I don't know if I necessarily buy the premise. To me, it was more split into early in the season until late in the season, or versus good team versus bad teams.
I think it's safe to say, though, now that Connor Williams is no longer here, and I still don't love the way that all that transpired and ended, and there was hope that maybe he'd come back, but there really wasn't much dialogue about having him come back. But I think it's safe to say that Connor Williams, when you're looking at the offensive line, that is the main cog missing that's making this thing feel like, where's the direction? I just thought he brought a sense of stability and a sense of consistency and toughness that this offense needed, and without him, it's a problem.
That's the key word you just said. He was probably the toughest offensive lineman on an offense that does not have a ton of toughness.
Yeah.
And should be pointed out, however, today he had 2 penalties on one drive for the Seahawks, had a holding and a false start. So
true. Him and everybody else had 2 penalties today, though.
Lord. Not Julian Hill. Julian Hill had 4 penalties. On that smarmy note of mine, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank my good buddy here, Ken LaVicka. Catch his work on ESPN Radio. When's your next show, Ken?
Poop, I will be on the air in 90 minutes nationwide on ESPN Radio, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Eastern time. So if you want similar musings and or frustration like this, you want to keep the dialogue going, just tune into ESPN Radio.
Very nice. Also, if you ever want to catch Florida Atlantic University action, by all means, go ahead. I think you had a tough loss yesterday against UConn, or actually got spanked pretty much.
Yeah, it was not good. I haven't watched a lot of good offensive football this weekend. Maybe next week.
There you go. So, and for everyone, thanks for joining us as always on this live post-game recap. That's going to wrap it up. Please like, subscribe, share, do all that good stuff, and we will be back at it. Don't know when, but be on the alert. If you subscribe, you'll get a notification. So that's more incentive to subscribe. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Have a good rest of the evening.